before January 6th became synonymous with the insurrection, it was also known for something pretty significant. Three women in Stanford, Kentucky was abducted by aliens January 6, 1976. It was Mona Stafford, Louise Smith, and Elaine Thomas. They were out celebrating Mona's 36th birthday, and they encountered something that night. I think it was around 11 p.m., maybe a little bit after. They described it as looking like an airplane on fire. And they were driving down the road. They noticed this thing, and suddenly their car, like the dash lights lit up, like there was some kind of engine failure or something like that going on. And, eventually the car sped up on its own to like 85 miles an hour. Next thing they knew, there was a bright blue light. They thought it was a state trooper or something coming up from behind them. And it was pulling their car backwards, I think. I'm not sure how far, but after that, they were kind of out of it. And I think an hour and a half later, they woke up. They were more in Houstonville. So, it's pretty interesting. If you don't know, look it up. Okay, so also on that night, my parents, this is years before I was born, but them and my older siblings, they were at my uncle's house. And they noticed this really huge ball of fire in the sky and smaller ones that they said were zipping around, just flying all over the place. The smaller ones, even though they were also like balls of fire, they had a long blue tail behind them whenever they'd be flying around. And so they stood outside, watched these things for a while, and eventually my parents decided they need to try to go home because they didn't know what it was, didn't know what was happening. Okay, on the way home, one of the small ones dived down toward the road and was like practically right in front of them, coming right at them. And they were afraid they were going to hit it like head on. They, didn't really know what to do. But luckily, right before it hit their car, it kind of flew up and over the top of it. So it didn't collide with them. And after they got home, they said, like the biggest ball of fire that was just kind of staying put where it was at, it was right up over a field, pretty much across the road from their house. And, where they lived at the time, compared to where the three women were abducted at in Stanford, Kentucky, we're talking about like nearly 100 miles difference there. And of course, there was eyewitnesses in Stanford, Kentucky, and there was some kind of investigator, whatever, there talking to people because there were eyewitnesses who had also saw the strange lights in the sky that night. And of course, mom and dad, they didn't have a telephone at the time or anything. They didn't actually get a telephone until the late 80s, almost 1990, maybe right before, somewhere in there. So, like they didn't really have a quick way of communicating with anybody. But this investigator also came to our hometown. And, my parents missed it, didn't get a chance to talk to him or anything, but they said they wish they'd known so they could maybe find out what happened to their car that night. Because, it died, they had to get a new one, pretty unfortunate. My parents, like, they didn't really like people that told lies. They always said that, lying was pointless and the truth would always come out eventually. And, so I don't really think they would have made the story up. Well, also, I thought it's kind of odd because here they are sort of believing in aliens, but when it came to ghosts and stuff like that, like they didn't believe in it at all. Like they just thought that stuff was silly. Well, I could explain why, I never really believed in ghosts, at least not for a really long time. And which I still don't, but that's for a different story. Anyway, let's fast forward now to, I think it was 1998, maybe 1999, followed the year. One of my friends, his grandpa passed away. So another buddy that we went to school with, he came over to the house and asked me if I wanted to go check on him, make sure he's doing okay. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So we go over and hang out with him for a few hours. And it's probably around 10 p.m., maybe a little bit after. My friend's taking me back home, and we're just a couple miles away from my house, right? We go around this curve and into a straight stretch. And maybe a quarter of a mile possibly a little bit farther up ahead of us, there's this green light. It's kind of football shaped, just sitting maybe 15, 20 feet above the yellow line, just floating there, And I thought, okay, there's got to be some easy explanation for this, right? Like, he's got a light in his car that's reflecting or projecting onto the windshield, making it look like something's ahead of us, like just floating there. So I'm looking around. I can't find any green lights at all in this dude's car. And I'm thinking, what in the world's going on? This is strange, it doesn't make sense. And my friend, he's just as calm as he can be, right? Driving down the road, acting like nothing's going on. And so I'm just kind of sitting there watching this thing in front of us. We get pretty close to it. We're getting ready to drive right underneath it. And as soon as we're about to pass underneath it, it takes off like a rocket. I mean, it flies over to the left side of us, over across the field. And we lose sight of it. My friend, he starts freaking out. He's like, "Come on, Deb, you saw that too?" And I'm like, "Okay, you saw it. I'm not the only one, so I'm not crazy." So anyway, if anything weird's happened to you, any strange experiences that can't be explained, hit the comments. Thanks.